That. Hold on. There we go. And we're live. Welcome back to Sigil Spotlight. My name is always Mr. Harlan Guthrie. I am joined once again by the lovely Joe Fallick. How are you doing, Joe?
Good afternoon. How are you?
Pretty dang good. It is a Friday of a weekend.
Love a Friday.
It's no long weekend or anything like that. But you know what? It can always feel longer if you put lots of house chores and
Well, we have Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day is on Monday, so it feels like a long weekend.
Yeah. Do you have any special plans for Valentine's Day?
Should we tell the folks at home our special Valentine's Day
Nope, that's
plans?
okay. I don't either. We did drop the little one off at school today with a bunch of Valentine's cards, which is really cute. Do you remember doing that?
Yeah. I remember sitting at the coffee table in the living room with my mom, just hammering out spelling. And I mean, we did it with Henry, so
that's right. That's the way
very
you do
nostalgic.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, look, no one's going to deny that it's not one of those corporate shilling type holidays, but it's a corporate holiday that we can also maybe not financially support, but emotionally support, because who doesn't love love? See, the audience does. We have a really special guest today, someone that I'm excited to bring up in a few seconds. But before we jump to that, I do want to mention that, of course, tomorrow at noon, so basically 1 hour ago tomorrow,
In 23 hours.
yeah, that's another way of saying it. Joe and I are going to be starting a game-a-thon, a 12-hour non-stop video game RPG extravaganza in support of the Acevedo's Fight Cancer GoFundMe account that's going on right now.
Yeah.
As those of you who may or may not know, Aaron Acevedo is the CEO and owner of Sigil, and his wife is going through a difficult is not even a word that begins to describe it, time right now, and they are in financial strain and in need of support and help. So as much as we would love to donate as much money as we have, we can't. So we're donating our time by doing a marathon gaming stream. That's right. So 12 hours may not seem as much as 24 hours or something like that, or 48 hours, or 72 hours.
And you'd be right if you thought that.
And you'd be right, because that's how time works. But we are going to be streaming nonstop for 12 hours tomorrow in order to raise a little bit of awareness for the GoFundMe. We're going to have some videos from some guests who are going to, stop in and say hi. We're also going to have some people from the Hereafter stream stopping by. Erica, if you've watched our RPGs on Tuesdays at 7:30, you'll recognize her from her time playing games and having a laugh. She'll be joining us, as well as I think Gary from that stream will be joining us, as well as a few others. So who knows? But more than anything, it will be just a long marathon of gaming in order to sort of hopefully get people excited to want to donate and feel the spirit and the season and all that kind of stuff.
We're going to be playing Escape Quest, Dread Hunger, GTFO, Back for Blood. There might be some RPG action in there, House of Ashes, and of course all of this is just to get everyone together to say fuck cancer.
And if none of those mean anything to you,
good.
That's okay.
Come by.
Because it doesn't
We'll
really
show
matter.
you.
I mean, more than anything, we're going to be hanging out. We're going to be talking and just having a good time. So please consider stopping by. The link is in the Discord. You can find it there. Also, I think it will be updated on the website as soon as possible. But the easiest way to find it is through the GoFundMe link, which I believe is on the Discord right now, and it will be featured there as the news forthcoming. So please consider stopping by. It's a noble cause. Well, noble, I don't know. It's an important cause, put it that way, for the people of the stream. But anyway, enough of that. Let's push the reality of the sadness situation out of the way for now. And I want to welcome to the stage the very talented, I want to say omnipotent, but it's not really true, but very, very many fingers and many pies. Please welcome Mr. Darren W. Pierce. Whoa! The crowd loves you, Darren. Listen to that. They're nonstop. They're just going crazy. How are you doing?
Hello. Good. Good. Yourselves?
Very, very well.
Doing great.
Very excited that you could join us today. And for the people who are watching this, many probably already recognize your name, maybe know where it fits in certain things. But for those of us unaware, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and maybe how you fit into the Sigil spider web of creativity.
Good word.
It's like every hero/anti-hero needs some sort of mythology and creation story.
Yeah, what's your origin story?
Back,
That's right, yeah.
Mine goes back into the depths of time in the year 2000. I was nosing around forums, and I used to play a PC game called Draken. And I got in contact, or rather the developers got in contact with me because I was posting fiction on their forums, and they asked me to work on a little free kind of MMO thing project with them, and I did the writing on that. It never got anywhere because the team fell apart, but it started a kind of snowball reaction where not long after I started to get a few more bits and pieces from people, and then eventually I ended up working with a company called Dark Quest in 2000 on City Guide 1, I think it was, Everyday Life. And that started a snowball of jobs and things in the role-playing game industry. And eventually I stumbled on Savage Mojo through Suzerain, because I was looking for an alternative to Scion. And I think this was back in, it's going to be about 2010. I met MMK and a few of the Suzerain bods, and I came up with a setting for them called Set Rising. My technology meets magic Egyptian setting without any kind of Stargate involved. And through that, I met Aaron. And over time, he eventually got me to do little bits and pieces for Sigil. And that is really how that kind of all connected.
That's
and
the
I mean,
chain
through
of
that,
events.
from 2000 to now, I ended up working on the Doctor Who role-playing game. I wrote when Ulysses Spiele owned the license for Warhammer 40k, Wrath and Glory, before Cubicle 7 took it over. I actually wrote a good chunk of what became the Forsaken book for the Forsaken Sister book for Wrath and Glory, the Cubicle 7. If you look in that book, you'll see I'm listed in there as one of the contributors kind of to the original design of it. So
That's cool.
That. And I worked with Joe Diva on the Lone Wolf role-playing game, which was that was good fun. And a bunch of other stuff. And obviously, as you know, Judge Dredd and the Worlds of 2000 AD was one of the last sort of big RPGs I worked on. I read a lot of the core book, and also Strontium Dog for it. I got the approval of John Wagner himself on that.
That's
one.
awesome.
So
Wow.
Cool.
You worked on that with Robert Schwab as well, too, right?
Yeah, Rob. But I think Rob wrote. He wrote the foreword and a few bits and pieces for Judge Dredd and the Worlds of 2000 AD.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
that's
cool.
fantastic. I mean, what a story career. And I love that it came from, like, fan fiction, too, though.
That's it. It
right?
came... The start of it was fan fiction.
I was just going to say that's incredible that you were kind of picked out of like the forum milieu for your talents and given work and sort of brought to the platform through your fan content. We see
really weird.
we see so much of that these days, and there's so many talented artists and writers, and it just goes to show, like, if you love something enough to create something out of just, you know, fanaticism and
passion.
You know, who knows what could happen.
Yeah.
And that's it. I've known a few people who have sort of written fiction and things, and then they've been spotted by developers in video game companies and brought on board to write for them.
It's awesome.
It happens.
Yeah.
I mean,
So-
I was stumbled on by a gentleman called Robert Mariner Dodds. You may know the name if you know the speculative science fiction / cyberpunk setting Carbon 2185.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say.
I worked for the last few years with Rob on Carbon. I've got a few bits and pieces in the updated core rulebook that's coming. I helped him finish Terminal Overdrive and get that over the line. But I also wrote London for the Combined City source book, and that was fun.
That's
Very
the one,
cool.
the London, Manhattan, Tokyo, right?
That's the one, yeah. That's it.
and that's Dragon Turtle Games, I think.
Yep, that's it, Dragon Turtle.
Yeah, it's a wonderful system, and I mean, again, in Sigil, through the way we sort of view things here on Sigil, it's obviously very much art focused. And as a detour for a second, the art in those books are absolutely gorgeous. They have, I think, one of my favorite cyberpunk sort of city settings and sort of the way that they view them. Rather than, my comparison, which is sort of like a more... typically, you see cyberpunk sort of walk that line between more fantasy, whereas the Carbon 2185 is very much like that futuristic punk. But in a way that's not cliche, because so many cyberpunks, from the John Carpenter films are just these kind of like ratty guys wearing stuff from the 80s, but it feels different. It feels like it's got a real different mode to it, so...
Yeah, that's what actually drew me to Carbon 2185 originally. I was poking around, and then Rob contacted me and said, "Hey, do you want to do some writing for me? I've heard that you worked on Doctor Who and so on, and Judge Dredd." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll be quite happy. And what do you want me to do?" And he said, "Well, could you write London for the Combined City source book that's coming out?" I went, "Yeah, on one condition." And he's like, "Name it." And I said, "I want to put the punk back into cyberpunk."
Yes.
Because I'm 53 this year. I'm an old punk. I grew up at 15 in the United Kingdom, watching people hurl bricks at police officers with mohawks, leather jackets, studs, screaming, lyrics from the Mac Lads and things like that. And I said to him, punk back into cyberpunk, because the way I see it, cyberpunk characters should never openly work for corporations.
No, of course.
That's my biggest bugbear in the cyberpunk genre in general.
For real, though, and it's become so commonplace for cyberpunk to mean futuristic corporations, and it's so weird because to me, that's never what it was, and that's never what my brain thinks of when I think what happens is these gorgeous movies, like Blade Runner and things like that sort of showed a tier system, and with the retrofuturistic wave of like the Paul Verhoeven and all those directors, people started really to associate that sort of corporate mentality with the future, and so it became difficult for people to divorce the two, or additionally having the idea that punks are like the enemy, like punks are the bad guys, for some reason, the brass knuckles and the dabbled coats. Well, then they must be the enemy that you're fighting. But that's never what it's been about. And I feel like Carbon 2185 walks that great line of feeling still very Blade Runner-ish, but also incorporating that fuck the system mentality that punk culture, It's really cool. So that must have been a bit of your probably one of your favorite pieces to work on then.
Oh yeah, I would say there's if you ask me to name say 3 things that I've potentially written that I really enjoyed working on. That's tricky because I've got quite a few that I really enjoyed working on. But Carbon's up there, especially the London part of the source book. Strontium Dog, because I'm a huge 2000 AD fan. I mean, I grew up with it. Again, it's a counterculture comic.
Yeah.
With a lot of punk influences and things like that. And then it's sort of a toss-up between Lone Wolf and Doctor Who, I suppose.
That's awesome. Talk to us a little bit about the Doctor Who, because the Doctor Who I was totally unaware of. I didn't even know. So how did you sort of work into that?
Way back, I was at an event, and Angus Branson came over for Cubicle 7 and said, "You're a bit of a Doctor Who fan, aren't you, Darren?" And I was like, "Just a little." I was born in 1969. My Doctor is pretty much Tom Baker, but I watched, before the BBC lost their archive files, all of the reruns before that, so I've seen all of Doctor Who in its prime. And he said, "Do you fancy doing some writing for the Doctor Who role-playing game that we're doing?" I was like, "Well, yeah, I'd love to do that." And then he turned around and said, "How about writing the first Doctor book for us?" And I'm a big William Hartnell fan, so that was something else.
That's awesome.
That's fantastic.
And I spent 6 months in research on the first Doctor book. And I was lucky enough to have a friend of mine who gave me access to the BBC scripts for the William Hartnell series. So even though the episodes in part were gone, I'd still got all of the story and all of the script. I also bought 2 William Hartnell series books as well to help me with that book.
I was going to say, because it seems like you've contributed to a lot of these established works of fiction, to these worlds. Do you find it difficult to kind of insert your own writing into these established narratives and timelines, I suppose? Like you said that you did 6 months of research for this project with Doctor Who. Is that very typical for your process, or do you sometimes have more leniency?
It really does depend on the project. So with Doctor Who, you're dealing with an established canon, a timeline that runs very strictly in the William Hartnell era from 1963. And if you get one tiny element of that wrong, there are 1,001 Doctor Who fans
That are going to get
who
so
will
angry.
publicly tear you into tiny little bits.
I'm sure the fan bases also vary on the degree of rabidity.
Yeah, for real.
Whovians are a different kind of fan.
Especially dangerous.
And yes, they're well, as the 10th Doctor would say, well, they're a special kind of fan. And or the 11th Doctor might say, yes, fans, Whovians. Well, what can I say? But where's the TARDIS?
Yeah, those are good impressions.
Very good,
They're
very
great.
good.
I think the audience liked those as well.
I was actually on a radio show with that impression when they did a call in between 2 doctors. One was a medical doctor and one was me playing playing.
Oh, that's
Smith.
cute.
That's great.
Do you have a personal favorite other than Tom Baker?
Interestingly, actually, I'm a really big fan of Jodie Whittaker.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
She is one of my favourite doctors so far.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I would like to have seen more. I'd like to see different scripts with Jodie, but overall, I've been quite. I'm very pleased with Jodie. I enjoy all the doctors really. Again, it's the showrunners that I have not so much an issue with, but I see things where it's like there's a thing that drives me up the wall.
Yeah.
And I've forgotten who talked about it recently. It was a lady, and it's a thread I think on Twitter or a video, and it's like, stop saving the world. Brackets galaxy, brackets universe in Doctor Who's case.
Yeah.
In the old sort of Doctor Who, a lot of the stories were more personal. They weren't
smaller
so much
scale stuff.
That's it. There's an escalation problem. You probably know this when you run D&D, when you run Savage Worlds, when you run anything. If you start having characters saving the kingdom, then the continent, then the planet, then the system that the planet's in, it escalates until you reach a point where what else can you save?
For sure.
The whole of reality?
Yeah.
You get that kind of Avengers Endgame thing.
Yeah, and then how do you go on after,
Thanos.
right? Yeah.
You know, how do you escalate to these heroes? And the answer is you go back to the drawing board and make it a personal set of stories. There's nothing more than I like doing than picking out characters when I'm running a game, looking through the backgrounds and pitching just a whole thing on these characters and their backgrounds, rather than, you know, somebody's in the kingdom is working to destroy the king and queen or so on. Those level of stories they're good if they're done right. But there's been so many of them now. It's like, take me
For
back
real.
to. It's in many ways, I kind of wish the old cliche of a gentleman in a hood in a tavern just turning around saying, "Oh, you got some rats in your basement," you know, that kind of thing.
Oh,
in many
100%.
ways.
And I think the problem is, too, because the stories that end at points that have a world saving, they're earned. They're deserved, you know? Like, the idea of Tolkien starting in Gondor and them throwing the ring. You know, it's like there's no build up, there's no crescendo, or if there is, it's an immediate crescendo, which is less important. And people often are too excited about that end game, for lack of a better word, so they're rushing towards it. It's actually funny because from a film perspective too, the Marvel Cinematic Universe did that. And then if you look at the other side, the DC side, I think one of their first movies was a team up. You know, they did like a real quick Batman and a quick Wonder Woman, and then they jumped right to a world-ending event in the Justice League movie, which was only like 4 movies. I don't know, I didn't watch any of them, but I think it was only like 3 or 4 movies into that series. Versus the Marvel side, which did like, I don't know, 20 movies or something.
So many movies.
Yeah, like so many. Just grrr. But at the very least, when they got to that crescendo point, you're like, oh wow, this is the culmination of events. That's it. Versus the other side where it's like, oh, this, I guess they're gonna fight the world. It just means so much less.
I think that's also the influence of Jon Favreau, because I mean, you can see that in The Mandalorian, you can see that in the Book of Boba Fett. Dave Filoni, Favreau, and Rodriguez kind of know this escalation storytelling, but they do it in a way where it builds over time rather than going 1, 2, 3, bang, world-ending event.
Yeah, which is it's so much more enjoyable to kind of be along for the ride, the small insular moments. And it's interesting because we are seeing a lot more of that to an extent, and I wonder if partly we're influenced by the film and media that we're consuming that are doing it wrong. Because I do think there has been sort of a slew. The Star Wars movies, for example, also I think are a great example of kind of doing that wrong. A quick crescendo at the first movie where we know nobody and they're basically relying on nostalgia to drive everything, you know? Whereas when people are going home and playing games, you know, around the table, maybe they're working more on, oh, I didn't like what I saw with that big explosion. I'm going to start working on the smaller stories. At least that's what I've experienced with my role-playing games. And
I wonder if that's what we're going to see with the Lord of the Rings series now that we've just seen those screenshots, because we're looking into small moments of these characters' lives, right? And I don't know how representative those screen grabs are of what the story is going to end up being, but it seems like, you know, we're being introduced to a midwife and to, you know, these nomads. It might have been that, how do you follow up on the Lord of the Rings series when literally Frodo went and saved the world? Like, what kind of stories are we going to be interested in seeing in that universe after that?
Yeah,
and that's it. I mean, with this show as well, this is set before all those major events. So you have the forging of the Rings of Power, the 9 made for mortal men, 7 for the Dwarf Lords, and 3 for the Tall Elf Kings. Galadriel has a ring, and those pictures of Galadriel in armor are absolutely brilliant.
Yeah,
that's
great.
That is so good. I can't wait to see that. That actually put the show right up there on my must-watch this show list.
Honestly, there's only one thing that dropped it for me, and this is a really petty thing, but we're going to talk about it because I want to. When they were doing casting calls for the show, and I don't know if you've heard about this, but when they were doing casting calls for the show in, I think they were doing New Zealand, they were asking for people who were comfortable to appear nude. And I got really worried because of the Game of Thrones influence being so, and I know Bezos is like, oh, I want another Game of Thrones. To me, of course, love and sexuality exists in the Tolkien universe, but not in the gratuitous way that it was in Game of Thrones. And to me, like, we watch it with our 4-year-old son. He's seen all Lord of the Rings because A, it's fantasy and we play D&D, and he recognizes that it's sort of separate, you know, cutting off the head of orcs. Yeah, it's gross, but it's also like an orc, you know?
Yeah.
But it also doesn't have any of that content, which we're not shy about worrying about, but it just adds another layer if they're trying to pitch it to the HBO adults. And that, to me, is the only thing that I'm genuinely like, oh, I hope they don't go that way. You know, I hope the casting call was sort of just a, well, you know, there's going to be a scene and we want to make sure people are comfortable with being in costume or something like that. But yeah, that made me a little bit worried. Because Game of Thrones has really done a lot of good and a lot of bad for fantasy. Because it's done a lot of good because people are like, oh, okay, well, let's look at Wheel of Time and let's look at this. But it's done a lot of bad because it's like, well, obviously adults want to see naked people and they want to see sex and sex and sex. So let's do what HBO did and just make that sort of what it's about. And I don't know, I'm a bit nervous.
I think one of the great examples of this is the recent success of Henry Cavill as Geralt of Rivia, The Witcher. The first series of Witcher had that kind of gratuitous violence and sex and nudity. Yeah. And then in the second series, Lauren Hissrich, she turned around and said, no, we're not having any of that. This is good. A story about Ciri, Geralt, Yen, and they're coming together as a kind of family, which happens in the books. It happens in Witcher 3, The Wild Hunt, the game.
Yep.
And she went, nope. And the internet saw the lack of all this and went, boom. The fan base exploded in a kind of, one side were quite happy that all this was coming together. And then there was another side of certain demographic of gamer bros, I suppose.
Yeah.
Who were very, very unhappy about this sudden lack of anything apart from, I think, 1 or 2 episodes, and that was it. And I enjoyed the second series more than the first.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of that. I've heard a lot of people saying that they enjoyed the second series more. I watched half of the first series, enjoying it. But I'm also one of those people that's like, kind of want to wait till it's got a bit of meat because I'm a binge watcher, as I think so many of us are now, where it's like, I want to watch a few seasons in a row. You know, I don't want to be cliffhanged at the end of season 1.
Yeah, I can appreciate that, because last night, over 2 days, I binge watched Reacher.
Oh, I've heard good things about that.
It's so good from a storytelling point of view, and the guy who plays Reacher is quite brilliant, and I was enthralled. Normally, I'm not really into those kind of shows.
Yeah.
Beyond the superficial kind of John Wick level, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah.
And suddenly, I'm there on like episode 6 on one day, and then the finale last night, and I was just...
Yeah, that's on my to watch list. I mean, genuinely, I'm experienced with that character previous because I watched the Tom Cruise movies, which...
Yeah, same as me.
And it's funny because Tom Cruise as a person is somebody I'm so but most of the time I'm a big fan of his movies. I don't know why, because I don't know, I almost feel guilty about it. But the guy makes good movies. I loved, and I'm sure you've seen it and appreciate it as well. Absolutely adored Edge of Tomorrow. I think it's one of the best sci-fi movies. It became a modern classic when I watched it. I was like, oh my God, this is like up there with the best action sci-fis I've ever seen. And I've seen it probably about 5 times since it came out.
Yeah, I enjoyed that film.
So good. It's so fun. And you know, all the Mission Impossible movies, they're all blast to go to. So you know, when he came out with those, I was like, yeah, I'll give them a try, and I enjoyed them. But I did like the character, and I do remember a lot of the complaints about the Tom Cruise versions being that his like stature is so, the books apparently, which I haven't read, you know, he's this huge muscly guy, and then the new Reacher, obviously they fixed that because the dude literally looks like a tank. He's just
that's
huge.
Right. Reacher is pretty much, as a friend of mine described him, he's like a jarhead Sherlock Holmes.
Yes.
On one hand, he's this big soldier.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, he's extremely intelligent, and he can link clues together like the best of the NCIS detectives.
So what's his dump stat then? If you've got strength and intelligence.
I would say strength and intelligence. He's not overly charismatic, but in a way he is, because his delivery is so spot on as the actor portrays it. You actually start out thinking, oh, this guy's a bit of a meathead, and then eventually you're with him.
That's
and
awesome.
You just want to watch episode after episode after episode and see how it all plays out.
Dexterity is his dump stat.
I was going to say, well, then Constitution or something.
And to me, it's funny because I think that was part of the uniqueness of the Jack Reacher character that people were upset about. It's a bit of a play on a trope. You either have the big dumb meathead or you have the wiry, intelligent. And I think the idea that a lot of people didn't recognize at first was that that's sort of a wink at the way we build characters. Jack Reacher is meant to be, oh, you think this guy is a big dumb meathead, but he's actually... So when Tom Cruise played him, it's kind of like, well, now it's just... It kind of makes more sense because Tom Cruise is like a little guy. And
Aww.
Well, not a little guy, but you know what I mean? Like he's like 3'6" or something. Right?
He's the Hobbit size.
So anyway, all of this started with Draken, you said, right? And
that's
right,
right,
So obviously PC gaming was one of those fundamental things. Were there other fandoms that you said you went to? There was another fandom you jumped to after that, right? Not Heavy Rain. What the heck was it? You mentioned Dragon Online or something? You mentioned at the beginning and it split my mind.
Warhammer?
No. Well, I'm wondering primarily, was it Dark Quest? I thought you said Dark Quest.
Oh, Dark Quest was the publisher of the books. This was going into the role-playing game industry, which happened really quickly. Like I said, about the latter part of 2000. What really happened was originally I used to teach at a local college, and one of the things I taught was 3D orientated level design using a design tool called the Quake Object Orientated Level Editor, COOL for short. And I was in with the developers of that quite a lot, and we used it in the course to teach people the basics of building levels and architecture in video games. And one student went off to work with Valve, which I was really proud of. But another one guy, he got picked up by the people who made the game iWar. I think they were called Particle Systems. It's a 3D space shooter. It was very unique at the time, quite amazing, really. Story driven. The ship was really cool designed, and it was quite grounded as well in a kind of reality sci-fi way. But they came to the course and they did a lecture on game design. And one of my students at the time, James Moore, a friend of mine as well, he was the one asking a lot of questions and coming up with a lot of good answers. And I get a phone call on the Monday after from Particle Systems saying, that guy James, is he capable of working in Sheffield? Because we'd like to hire him. So I told James and said, look, you've got a job with Particle Systems in Sheffield if you feel you could up sticks from Wolverhampton and travel to Sheffield and work full-time at the studio. Wow. And within 3 days, he was in Sheffield.
Cool.
Wow, that's fantastic.
But we go forward a bit on that into 2000, and I get an email from James saying, you got me this job in the video game industry. I'm repaying this favor. I know you do role-playing game writing. Here is a thing that's happening. Expect the guy to contact you because I forwarded you to him. And then I got an email from the Dark Quest boss asking whether I was interested in submitting a piece of a test piece for their upcoming book. And within 30 seconds of me hitting send, I got a reply back. He was going to read it straight away, and in 5 minutes he sent me a contract.
Wow. That's
to
fantastic.
work on the first, and that snowballed over the years until where I am now, which is
so you never know where those little things are going to lead you.
That's it. Working mostly with Rob now on Carbon 2185. I'm sort of we've had to put it on the back burner, but we originally had a project called Solarpunk, which is the next iteration of Carbon 2185. It was going to be an alt universe Carbon, a utopian setting with some darker elements that the players had to discover and fight against. But obviously COVID hit quite badly, and a few other things happened. And then Rob sort of, well, we can put this on the back burner, but we'll still talk about it over time, because he wanted to get Terminal Overdrive out for Carbon 2185. Again, COVID and Brexit and a bunch of other things conspired to delay that quite a lot. And I helped Rob get that over the line. I wrote an adventure for it, a bunch of things for it, and well, when you see it, you'll see. So you might recognise some of the stuff I've written on it. I apparently have somewhat of a unique style when it comes to writing.
That's a compliment. That means that people can start, figuring out which is the
Solarpunk itself. The trademark was taken by somebody else. So rather than fighting that, me and Rob just went, well, we'll just call it Solar 2485 then, and we'll set it in the Carbon 2185 universe hundreds of years later and do that. And then I realized that I'd made Berlin in solarpunk, as it was back then, quite central to what was going on in that timeline. But we weren't able to do the Berlin book in Carbon 2185 due to COVID. Because I was going to write that, and then I caught COVID before my first vaccination, which not only delayed my vaccination, but nearly ended my career and me permanently, along with my wife. Yeah. So fortunately, I bounced back, and it was touch and go. But this year, I've started to look at Berlin. I've got about 13,000 words in a couple of weeks done on Berlin already.
Wow.
And that's now the catalyst for what's going to happen in 2485. So Berlin 2185, to give you an idea of it, is the first of what they're going to start calling zone cities. This concept in 2485 is that the cities that exist now don't exist. So London, Manhattan, New York, all these like big cities are even bigger. And they're zoned. So instead of sort of, let's go for Berlin again, it's a walled city to keep out the rise of water, but it's also an extremely eco-friendly city for a cyberpunk setting because it's the first of its kind. It has a massive army of drones, tiny baseball-sized drones that go around fixing buildings and also scrubbing the atmosphere from pollution, while Berlin itself is beginning to reclaim the area around it.
Wow.
And this leads on to 2485, where this technology is really, really advanced. Because I've always said with Carbon, this is not cyberpunk gritty, as you've said.
Yeah.
It's speculative science fiction.
Yes.
So we can push the tech in Carbon 2185 into a really exciting, spin-off of some of the things we've got now. We've got people designing things that eat pollution in oceans and plastics. Well, in Carbon 2185, Berlin can do that to the land. It can reclaim a polluted landscape over time with these giant, almost like dune-like harvesters that eat the pollution. They convert it into useful things and biofuel.
Wow.
Very cool.
So we've got that kind of thing going on. So that's really what I'm doing at the moment with Rob.
That's exciting, though.
Currently. And of course, there's Sigil itself.
Yeah. Well, and getting to work with so many different publishers, getting to jump from project to project, getting to sort of spin ideas into something else, it must be so rewarding too, because, you get to fire on all cylinders with different aspects.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to Joe's question of sort of like working in someone else's sandbox.
Yeah.
The idea to work in someone else's sandbox, my advice is always to harmonize with that person. Harlan creates a setting. I come along, I don't immediately say it should be like this. I'll offer a suggestion if I think that maybe there's a gap that needs plugging. But 9 times out of 10, I'm willing to take the sand that somebody else has got and help shape that sand in their vision, not mine, because you don't want conflicts. I mean, I worked on a project called The Ancient Ones with an artist called Alan Pinnacle. You can actually get the book, and a lot of the stories in that book I wrote for him. It's an art book plus story book, and I've always wanted to work on one of those. So that was another great project I got to work on. I worked on, and actually Aaron is kind of responsible for that because Jason Engel, the artist, you may know Mausolea, his project.
Yeah, we had him on the show.
I helped design and write that. I don't know if he told you or not. But
no way. He did mention, but I didn't
see my name.
I didn't put your name to the face until realizing now, but he mentioned it
I
as
did
well.
an absolute ton of writing for Jason on that. And
wow.
He put me in touch with Alan Pinnacle, who said, I heard what you did with Mausolea. Can you do the same with Ancient Ones? And so I worked with him on that. And he recently sent me a lovely... Hold on, just let me dig this out for you.
Yeah,
yes, please. Oh, no.
Yeah, sound of cracking and banging. This workroom / computer room is full of everything. A few days ago, it was full of swords.
Ooh.
Because
that's
when
tantalizing.
I'm writing RPGs, I often also dress up for charity with the Galactic Knights as Aragorn, son of Arathorn, but not the film version, the book version.
The book version, nice.
And a Witcher, which
Very cool.
if you look on Discord, on the Sigil Discord, my avatar on there is me dressed as a Witcher.
Oh, that's awesome.
This is the Ancient Ones.
Oh, wow.
And
Oh, story time.
here we go. What, you story time? Let me see. This is impromptu. I warn you now. Alan would probably really like this. Let's see.
Oh, yeah, the art in this is fantastic.
The art in this, I'm just trying to find a couple of these really cool art bits and pieces. Let me find. Yeah, I wrote. God, I must have written 7 or 8 stories in this.
Wow.
He's got some. They're very surrealist pieces as well, which is what I absolutely loved about this project.
The artwork itself is very surreal as well.
You can probably
look
see
at
that.
Wow.
Beautiful.
And it's a gorgeous book.
Oh, the colors are brilliant.
I'll find you one more
Yeah, please.
piece. And this. This is a big spread.
Wow.
Wow.
That's known as the Tree of Ardalor. It's like the World Tree
Gorgeous.
from Norse myth.
Yeah.
And yeah, basically I wrote Memories of the Void, Rowan in the Great City, The Seven Sisters, The Tree of Ardalor, The Knights of Sol, Mangala Harbour City, Sons of Orion, and that was it in that one.
Wow. Fantastic. I mean, it's crazy. Again, I mean, you obviously have a big footing in science fiction, and
Oh yeah, and fantasy.
But you know, this, like we said, the speculative sort of the hope punk version of all of these settings, rather than what we typically see. Which, you know, especially there's so much science fiction nowadays that sort of really puts a damper on the future as a whole. You know what I mean? But obviously, even the colors of that book, and I'm sure the stories that correlate, are so positive. They speak of a very different subject of science fiction that I think is refreshing. Frankly.
It almost feels like a Studio Ghibli vibe, the way that Miyazaki kind of handles the mix between nature and technology.
That's exactly how Rob described it to me. He said, imagine Cyberpunk meets Studio Ghibli.
Yeah, like Nausicaa,
and
Valley
said,
of the Wind
do
stuff.
you want to be the creative lead on it? And I went, yes.
I mean, who wouldn't? That's awesome.
So, obviously, I mean, again, the storied careers, so many different games, very, very different feels. And obviously, there is a great number of projects that have sort of... Actually, speaking of, what were your thoughts on, like, the Judge Dredd movie?
The Carl Urban one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually enjoyed that because I enjoyed Carl's portrayal of Dredd.
Yeah.
There were a
Better
few
than
things
Stallone.
different, obviously, to the 2000 AD comic.
Yeah.
But I think if you're going to create anything from a book, sometimes you have to change things.
Yeah.
And what works on paper in a book doesn't sometimes translate well to media.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You can get away with it with animation more, but film, as you know, picks up every detail and every issue. I mean, if you look at some of the original Judge Dredd designs from the World of 2000 AD book, we used high definition comic art in that because we had access to every single issue of Dredd and Strontium Dog and anything that was available from Rebellion. But if you took that and you put that as it is on the TV now, I don't think the designs of like the Lawgiver and of the bikes and of the vehicles and the costumes would translate as well as the modernized designs that they used for the films.
Yeah. Sort of have to walk that line between, you know, encouraging creative vision in its own right for a different medium versus, I mean, that happens time and time again, whether it be novels or comics or whatever. I mean, I think it is one of the biggest reasons that like a Stephen King novel has always had trouble being translated, because there's just certain verbiage, that just doesn't translate properly. And if you try to, shit weasels in a book sound scary. In the movie, you're kind of like, well, it just sounds like a weird, joke of a monster.
That's it, yeah.
Now, all of this started with PC gaming. Do you still PC game?
I used to play Space Engineers back in 2013.
Oh, yeah.
And my PC, it was horrible, really. I paid quite a bit for that PC. Back in the day, it was $2,500 to get a custom-built rig that could run Crysis. Not in max settings, because I don't think there's anything built on the planet.
Not even the people who made Crysis can run Crysis on max.
Not even Deep Thought from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy could run Crysis. Yeah. And in fact, that probably is the real reason why things crashed. With the Heart of Gold as well, with that little computer. I think it was trying to run Crysis. But honestly, my PC got hit by workmen down the street, turning the substation on and off repeatedly when they were working. I was out. I came back, and it had melted the processor and the motherboard. The power supply had gone. And, I mean, at this point, I got an original, you could live in it, kind of Xbox style, I think, or it was one of the later Xboxes. And I kind of went into console gaming more.
Yeah, it's
and
a little
I recently was one of the luckiest people on the planet, very early on, to actually get a Series X on launch day.
Oh wow!
Cool.
So I've been playing a lot of things, because honestly, that thing is pretty much a PC. Add a keyboard and mouse to it, and it's more powerful than the rig I paid $2,500 for now.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, they're definitely becoming more
incredible.
Smart.
And strangely enough, I still play Space Engineers now, but on the Series X.
It's a great game. Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic.
I actually have a YouTube channel where I do tutorials. I work with Keen Software to provide content for Space Engineers. I was on their live stream, Devs Lost in Space Xbox Anniversary live stream last year, and hopefully I'll be on again this year.
Well, what's the YouTube channel name? We can shout it out.
Wait, I'm finding it right now. I think I got it.
You think you found it?
Yeah, I think I found it.
Already?
Yeah.
See if you've got it.
It's your name is D Wolfie One.
Spot on.
Is that it?
There you go.
And the picture of the avatar on that is actually a ship I built in 2 weeks recovering from COVID, when I got hit with COVID the first time. As I was recovering from COVID, I put Space Engineers on the one day. I said to my wife, right, I'm going to build a ship. I don't care. I am getting over this damn thing regardless. And I literally just knuckled down and built the ship in 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
With the game controller.
So if you're watching this, go, give a subscribe to, there you go, DWolfY1.
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 Mm-hmm.
Lots of Space Engineers here. I mean,
that's a fun way to spend like a bout of being extremely ill. Just get it super invested in a video game.
Focus is it's a strange thing. It zeroes you down, and after a while, you completely forget you're not feeling 100%, and you're focused on creating this thing from scratch. Because anyone who's ever played Space Engineers knows you start literally with nothing.
Well, and it's funny because Space Engineers, there's sort of two games that are very similar to Space Engineers. Well, there's many games that are similar. Space Engineers does it better on many, many levels, especially when it comes to like the actual engineering side of things.
That's it, yeah.
But the one that we pivoted to was Satisfactory.
I was
Did you
just
play
gonna
Satisfactory?
So fun.
Satisfactory is excellent. I haven't played it, but I've watched absolute tons of live streams. And,
so good.
That's like a Sunday evening. Harlan and I will look at each other and be like, "Where did 60 hours go?"
Yeah, it's just one of those immediate sinks. But it's absolutely brilliant. I mean, there's so many great games nowadays too.
I think
we're very lucky.
We live in a great time.
Yeah.
Video games have changed drastically because, like I said, I was born in 1969, so I've seen the rise of technology.
Yeah.
Through the first computers to these incredible consoles and PCs, And games like Matrix, that's not a game, it was a demo. The Matrix Awakened demo for Xbox Series XS and PlayStation 5 is mind-blowing.
Yeah.
The Unreal
my
Engine
gosh.
5 technology now,
Yeah.
I look at it and it's like Sean Murray gif from No Man's Sky.
Yeah.
Mind-blowing. That's another of my favourite games as well.
We played a lot
So
of that
good.
too. Yeah.
No Man's Sky, Space Engineers, building games, role-playing games like The Witcher, anything. I mean, if you put a role-playing game and a building game together, I'm pretty much, that's it. I'm sold.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
take my money now. That.
We've sunk tons of hours into the same sort of stuff. I mean, and there are a number of games that do it really well, in terms of like building, and then there's a number of games that don't do it very well, like Fallout 3 or Fallout 4, I think it was, had
Fallout
the building.
4's settlement design leaves
Yeah.
a lot to be desired, especially when you now can compare it to things that are doing it so much better, like No Man's Sky, which has some of the best building settlement kind of design in a game.
Oh, it not only does it feel really good to be building in it, but it's a game that actually has a great whole everything else. You know what I mean?
And the frightening thing about No Man's Sky is there's been 18 updates over 5 years, small and large, that have changed the game drastically from launch to what it is now. And Sean said the other day that this isn't like the end of the No Man's Sky journey. All these updates are the beginning. They're still got stuff to add, and now they're bringing it out on the Nintendo Switch.
I saw, which is great, because that obviously, Sean Murray, I think, right? He was like, I remember that launch too, because I remember how like terrible of a launch it was. It really, and then everyone kind of wrote him off as sort of a scam artist, and then slowly it started to come back, and I'm so glad where it is now.
Yeah, it's an absolutely incredible game. I can just spend it. And the great thing with it as well is you could play it with me because it has crossplay.
That to me is the thing, right? Like, especially nowadays, they're getting crossplay even more. Like Back 4 Blood, I think, has crossplay. I was just playing another game that has the new Rainbow Six Extraction has crossplay.
Yes,
Doesn't Battlefield do crossplay too?
The new Battlefield has crossplay. Yeah. But Valheim is another one we sunk a ton of hours in. People are doing that.
Yeah, my friend plays Valheim. My other friend is sitting with his Series X going, please bring Valheim to the Series X, please.
Oh, it's not on Series X next.
No, it's only PC. But
I didn't know that.
Jealously, like sort of Gollum, staring at the one ring of this.
Oh, they will
game,
for sure. There's
it.
no way they won't. 7 Days to Die, I think that's on everything now. That was another building.
The Xbox version of 7 Days is a bit rough.
Is it?
Conan Exiles is quite good on
We
Xbox.
have
We
that.
downloaded. We haven't played it yet.
We bought
haven't
it on
cracked
sale,
into it.
and we haven't cracked it yet but it
good.
looks.
It's good fun. It's
We
been
played a lot of-
updated drastically since launch again as well. It's got lots of nice new systems in it. I can talk for hours on things like this, I warn you now.
Now,
Well-
as someone who got really into the space engineering, spaceships and whatnot, I'm curious if you have an opinion on Star Citizen.
Oh yeah.
That's an interesting one because, again, it's almost like the situation with the non-fungible tokens, the byword Doom these days, the NFT, which is the publishers of video games, One Ring. This is, again, the potential for it. The technology itself's interesting, but the way that people are approaching it and the way it harms the environment, as somebody who's doing this kind of solar punk and utopian design where we're repairing a doomed planet from Carbon 2185, it kind of sticks a little in the throat in the way it is. But Star Citizen gets my ire in a way because they've made a stupid amount of money for things that don't exist. The ships in Star Citizen you can buy a concept. Many of them you're still waiting for the developers to build, but you've
100%.
paid for that ship
Yeah.
on the thing. It's like buying a piece of the moon in a way, or a star.
Yeah.
If that star winks out in the next year, you've paid for it, but it's gone.
Yeah. No, it's so true.
I'm just looking on their
they
Wikipedia
can't find
page.
your star most of the time in the sky because they didn't map it. They didn't bother to put it down because millions of people bought stars and they didn't bother tracking where they were.
Just like now I own a star.
They've made $400 million from
Yeah.
crowdsourced funding in November
Crazy.
2020.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm in there too. I backed it in 2013. I saw it on Kickstarter, and I thought, hey, another space game. Why the hell not? I was totally enamored by the idea. I grew up playing Wing Commander, so I remember loving that, and I was like, this is great. You know, this is gonna be a lot of fun. And over the years, like, I've dabbled back into it. Every once in a while, I'll download it, I'll play a bit, and I'll leave it.
Jump back in.
You know what I mean? Like, at this point, I have no idea. But we're going on 10 years next year since they first said it was going to be whatever. Yeah. You know, they have, like, Gary Oldman and Mark Hamill, apparently, in the cast.
Yeah, they got all the big names in Squadron 42.
Yeah, to me, I'm just...
It's still not getting more finished.
No, at this point, I'm washing my hands of it. I am on the sit and wait. I'm obviously not putting any more money into it, but I'm kind of just like, okay, cool. What happens, what happens. I don't go to the forums anymore. I don't do any of that stuff because at this point, literally, who knows? I have no idea. But I do feel bad for people that are still investing because I feel like
it is
a scam.
It's a lot of my friends, especially some of the video game developers, are like, this is just a scam.
Yeah.
It feels like a scam, even though they do have a beta and so on. They have content you can play. It's still not in the same level as some of the other content. It's like,
no, it's not.
It'll be Elite Dangerous that potentially finishes the race to get walking around spaceships and so on.
Well, that's funny too, because they came from it from different sides. You know, Elite Dangerous, you couldn't get out of your spaceship and you could do kind of a lot of stuff. And then Star Citizen sort of has all of their other stuff, but you can't really... Well, you can fly ships, but not in the same way.
No Man's Sky's got all of the, like, visiting all these extra planets and whatnot, but there's no real, like, granular spaceship type.
No, the only real spaceship that we can get on in No Man's Sky is the freighter, and that really is just a kind of warping base. It doesn't fly physically around. If it did, then I'd be over the moon. Because I'm
literally, figuratively,
all kinds. I am a co-op player. Honestly, I am a co-op player. I love co-op games.
Same. Well, again, that's we're in the same room. If that's not clear, but
yep, I kind of worked it out.
Basically, that's we definitely gravitate towards co-op as well because it's an absolute blast to get to be like...
Recently, I was playing... there's a bit of an issue with it at the moment, but the Techland are working on a patch. I was playing with a friend of mine on the Xbox on Dying Light 2, and that is absolutely stunning co-op. That game is absolutely fantastic.
Harlan's been crushing that one by himself.
I'm on... How many hours have I put into it already? 25 hours I'm in.
Yeah, I think I'm on about 40, and I still haven't left old Villador.
Oh my god, you haven't left Old Villador in your 40 hours?
Well, Harlan likes to just run around.
Yeah.
Parkour.
Yeah.
What's going on over here?
Yeah.
What's going over there?
That's fair. That's so funny.
Side quests. The side quests are really good.
Yeah.
So funny. Harlan will be like, what's that sound? There's a coin dropping. Oh, well, and he'll just keep running, and it's happening like 40 times.
That's my only complaint. The coin dropping is so off. It's just like constantly like ding, ding, ding.
But if you're like Darren and you're investigating all of these little side stories, then you're going to be removing.
No, you know what? Maybe I should do... Because now I'm in... Well, I won't ruin anything, but I'm thinking I should go to Old Villanor again and just spend more time going back and looking at all the houses and stuff because... like I spent a long time before I did the first mission too. I think I got up to level 15 or something, parkour, before I even like did the start of the main mission. I just kept running around and trying to find a way to climb to the roof of the hospital and be like, I can do this.
You need to find... It's like, oh, I need to get the inhibitors to upgrade my stamina so I can climb higher.
Exactly.
And so now you go searching for the boxes that have them in, but some of them are in dark hollows. So you go into the dark hollow. I go in there during the day because I am absolutely mad in that regard. Yeah. I will go in there during the day because I'm thinking, unless it's a really dangerous volatile, this is combat XP.
Yeah, exactly.
And I need to level my combat.
Do you go in stealth or you go in swinging?
Column A, column B, with B being stealth more, because I'm more of an Assassin's Creed style player than I am, or a Tenchu style player, or whichever stealth game, Splinter Cell, than I am a running in, swords swinging. So
Yeah.
if given a chance to sneak, then sneak is my favourite sort of.
Do
I like-
you
modus
like
operandi.
pay attention to the clothing as well? Because that's the one thing I don't. Do you? Okay. I'm the
Yeah,
worst
because
for the
your
clothing.
gear in Dying Light 2 is one
Yeah.
of those things.
But to
compared
me,
the first game,
He's
It
in a
became-
sweatshirt +2 right now. Of course he cares about the clothing.
I'm actually
me-
in
it's pretty cool.
my Witcher hoodie.
I love
it.
Looks
I love
great.
It.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. The medallion. Yeah. Of
So
course.
the-
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't pay attention to the clothes. To me, it gets too insular. I'm just like, whatever's this higher, sure, cool. Because like I don't know what kind of. I still don't know what kind of style I'm playing. I'm just kind of running. through
Yeah,
it.
I pay attention to some of the things that boost up things like my if I'm earning combat XP,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, stick on all the gear that gives you more combat XP.
Yeah.
But I'm fond of parkour XP, so I'm like, at the moment, I'm rolling around in things that give
Like
me
two
more
different
parkour
sets.
and stamina regeneration.
That's
So
smart.
it's
how I do with
You're
Skyrim.
probably smarter than I.
Because seeing these role-playing game systems in video games is another great sort of synergy
Well, that's
between
it. 'Cause
our
when I started
hobby.
off playing Dying Light 2, I played the first one twice actually because I really liked it, and
I did.
I was a bit disappointed at the beginning until I realized that Dying Light 2 is so much more of a role playing game with the Dying Light engine, and I think like
That's it.
'cause even the way the models act, like the first one was sort of much more real and kind of felt more emotional at times. And this one does too, but like even the way the models act reminds me more of like a Fallout or a Outer Wilds.
the way it brings in the camera into
Yes.
frame.
Yeah, right. It kind of looks
brings
like
them
Outer
right up to
Worlds,
you.
you know, where you're like having a moment of talking, and
And that's it. You focus on them, and the lip syncing is really good in Dying Light too. I was impressed by the way that they actually.
but
the
even the way they
emotional
look, people
talk.
look a little bit more not cartoonish, but like a little bit more
Stylized?
Like their features are a little bigger, and some of them look
That's it.
accurate, but it's just interesting. But yeah, we're gonna be playing all day tomorrow, doing the game-a-thon. So,
Yeah, I saw that on the Sigil Discord.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of reason to be helping out the wonderful
Absolutely.
Aaron and
Yes.
Sigil.
And,
But yeah, anyway,
that's
Darren, this has been an absolute blast. Thank you so much for hanging out with us and telling the people a little bit about what you do and who you are. Sincerely, thank you for stopping by. We'd love to have you by again.
Oh
But
yeah,
I think-
I'll come back.
Good.
Yay.
but I
you
think
want
that is
me?
it
You
for-
want me back next week? I'll come back.
2 weeks from now.
I write a lot each day.
Yeah.
I sit in front of this computer, work on role playing game stuff, or go downstairs and play Space Engineers, make a video, tutorial, or just play for fun.
Living the dream.
9 times out of 10, if I'm not playing something new, then I'm on The Witcher 3 because I
Yeah.
can't seem to escape The Witcher 3. It draws me back in constantly.
Like so many people. Yeah.
That's
If you're after a good co-op game that it started out a bit rough, but it now is quite good, Outriders.
Oh, Outriders.
It's from a studio called People Can Fly. They did Bulletstorm. If you
I
love
played-
science fiction and you like shooting things and you like co-op and you like working together, you can play 3-player co-op on Outriders, and it supports crossplay. At one point, there was a person, me, playing on the Xbox. This was the Xbox One X before the Series X.
Yeah.
And then I think it was the Xbox One X, might have been the Series X. Blurs. But we've got a guy on PC and someone else on PlayStation,
Oh, that's so
all
awesome.
playing in the same game.
Just a
through the-
smattering of.
This actually does look like something you and I would like, darling.
See, Darren knows what's up.
We really liked. There was a game that totally came under our radar, and we tried it and really liked it, called Remnants from the
I
Ashes.
knew you were gonna bring that one up.
You played that?
So
I was going
good.
to say today, strangely enough, Remnant from the Ashes had an update on the Xbox. It's one of my favourite games.
Yeah,
Remnant, I love it.
Loved
it was free on Epic, and we were kind of like, whatever, let's try it. It's co-op, and we got totally absorbed
Yeah.
into it. We're like,
It's
holy
superb.
shit. Does this have any of that kind of feel? Because it looks a little bit like it.
A little, yeah. It's more of a role-playing game than Remnant. So there's
Okay.
a story, there's dialogue, there's character creation. So you can make your character
Fun.
how you want them to look. It's not Mass Effect levels of character creation,
No,
but
yeah.
it's still there.
But it looks
Um,
like sort of a single storyline, right? Like we're moving forward through something
Yeah.
rather than like branches.
Not open world.
That's it.
really.
Yeah, it doesn't branch. It goes from A to B to C to
Good,
D to
because
E.
you know what? That's
And then it has
one
an end
thing.
game.
Good. Well, that's what I want. Honestly, there's so many games, especially with co-op, that are like bram, and they're neat in concept, but honestly, sometimes they're too exhausting. What I really wanted, what for you and I, is a single player. Or
That's
sorry,
more
a-
linear, like
sorry,
you can
a
sit
co-op,
down
yeah,
and it's
linear.
delivered
And-
to you.
And I think that's
Yeah.
what was so great about Remnants is we were like,
Yep.
okay, cool. Now I have one last question. Is this has loot in it? I'm assuming, right? Is it
Indeed, it
shared
does.
loot?
You get instance loot. So basically, when you pop open a thing or something drops, you get yours, and you get yours, and there's no kind of loot stealing.
That's all we need.
That's the only issue I have with most co-op games, besides what I just mentioned, is like Borderlands. Every time
Yeah,
we try
that
playing it,
irritated me to no ends on the original Borderlands, and
Yeah.
until they added, I think in Borderlands 3 or 2, instance loot.
yeah,
There was the option to have old style loot and instance loot. Instantly, it was instance loot. Thank you.
yeah,
100%.
that's what we got to go for.
Yep,
Nobody's
gotta
Well,
go
you know
for
what?
it.
Pistol.
Maybe we should do some Outriders
Add it to the
tomorrow
roster.
instead. I would totally be
It's
down.
quite
for that.
brilliant. The story is really good. The
Yeah.
feel to it is impressive, and I mean, if you watch the trailer, it's definitely it has a kind of Mass Effect, but more raw feel,
Yeah,
Very cool.
yeah,
and
I
it
think
has
we
lots
might-
of powers. So imagine taking the biotics of Mass Effect, which weren't really all that effective against, say,
Yeah.
large groups of enemies, and having classes like the Pyromancer, or my favorite, which is the Technomancer. They're supposed to be a kind of long-range engagement specialist that works
trickster.
well with sniper rifles,
Yeah,
but my Technomancer likes kind of getting mid-range, and she's very deadly with area effect, and they can summon turrets out of nowhere.
Cool.
And
I love a
she's
good
got
turret
two I
system.
can throw down. One which freezes things and one which poisons things. So they get poisoned and then sort of frozen, or the other way around,
It's like
And
peanut
they
butter and
heal.
jelly.
by causing damage. So every time the Technomancer inflicts damage to the enemies, they heal their health back.
Oh, that's awesome.
The Devastator is the tank kind of class.
Yeah,
They smash things. So every time they kill an enemy, they heal.
that's fun.
The Pyromancer heals when things die when they're on fire.
Mhm.
And with the Pyromancer, there are ways of turning your enemies into human bombs.
So they're always on fire.
So they literally explode and burn everyone else to ash.
What about the
And then
trickster?
you've got the Trickster, who's a master of time and space. And Tricksters basically they heal from close combat, kills. And the favourite thing with the Tricksters, when you get the ability, you can set a point in time where your character is, or rather in space. And you then run from that point and you leave a kind of trail with you. You could kill a bunch of enemies, then trigger that ability again. It will snap you back to where you were. An incredible
Very
concept for a power in a role-playing game, actually.
Yeah, that's really cool. Reminds me of S5E a little bit. That's
Yeah.
I
Sigil
was
stuff.
just going to say something like that in S5E would be
Mm.
intriguing. But yeah, I do recommend Outriders.
Well,
They recently released a massive patch just before Christmas, which reworked the end game, gave loads of free loot, put a transmog system in. Any feedback that they got from the community where Outriders had made mistakes, they fixed. And now it's an absolutely brilliant game. I
Cool.
absolutely love it.
I mean, honestly, I think you sold me on it. Intensity of a shooter, depth of an RPG. Outriders' brutal and bloody combat combines frantic gunplay, violent powers, and then a deep RPG system. I think that's feels really good for me because that's exactly what we loved about Remnants was like the gunplay and like the story.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I
I feel
adore Remnant for
Yeah.
let me see if I've still got this. I actually had a clip of my Trickster very early on in action
Oh yeah,
on Outriders, and the kind of thing they can do when they just walk into a room full of enemies. If it's still on Xbox Live, it may not be, in which case I need to re-record Outriders stuff because I was addicted to Outriders again because it's co-op but also because it's single player, story driven as well.
No,
I think it's vanished. Right, I'm going to have to re-record that.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, that's a great recommendation. I think we're going to be
super.
playing that tomorrow, maybe instead of the RPG. I think we'll swap that out. Because
Sounds
that sounds
great.
more fun. And honestly, RPGs are exhausting sometimes when you're gaming for 12 hours.
Don't we
already.
know
That's it.
it?
When you want to get into a sort of like game like that, Outriders is perfect because you can dive in,
Yeah.
shoot a bunch of stuff, follow the story, do side quests, and you've got a lot of repeatable content in that as well. So if you liked that side quest, you can repeat it with your friends.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Cool.
And
love it.
the end game of Outriders takes you to brand new areas that you've never seen before. And all the side quests in Outriders take you to instant like areas off the main, because it's like a hub and spoke structure.
Cool.
So you have a big kind of hub map area, and then bits off it, and you do a side quest. It takes you into a new area, not a recycled area. So you've not seen that area before. And the same with the end game. All the stuff you see in the end game is brand new.
Very cool.
Well, if you want to watch us play Outriders, people watching this, tomorrow at 12 o'clock, we're going to be starting our 12-hour stream, and I'm thinking we're going to be doing that around 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So check out Outriders with us, and also join us tomorrow. And also, thank you so much for Darren for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Darren.
Absolute blast.
pleasure.
Definitely going to have you back. That is it from us, ladies and gentlemen. Hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we will, as always, see you around the table.